As we look at this story in Luke chapter 9, I'm going to ask a question. Do you ever notice how easy it is to misunderstand someone when you're distracted? Has that ever happened to you? Maybe somebody's telling you a really important story, and you're nodding along. You may even be saying something like, yeah. And you haven't really heard anything they're telling you. You might agree to something you didn't mean to agree to. Maybe you're out with your spouse, and it's that special dinner. At the restaurant you've chosen, there's a TV just over their shoulder. And the game you're not watching because you're with them is there. It can be distracting. Maybe you're like the husband whose wife said, "You're not even listening to me, are you?" And he thought, what a strange way to start a conversation. It's easy to think we're just listening, but really we're just hearing words. We're distracted by any number of things. Our minds are elsewhere. There's too much going on around us, and we're not really listening. The results can be rough. It happens in church. We're standing, we're singing, the music's playing, it's incredible. You're thinking about lots of other stuff, and you may even be singing the words. Not right now, I'm sure, but maybe even the preacher is preaching. And you're nodding, and you're watching, your eyes are facing that direction, but mentally you're thinking about something else. But truly listening means understanding, internalizing, letting the words guide or shape us in some way. And in an age and a generation of countless distractions, there's nothing more worthwhile we can do than listen, carefully listen to the voice of God. So this is week 7. I want to say welcome. Week 7, behind the scenes of the Gospel of Luke, where we're looking at some of the most well-known events in the life of Jesus. And what does that mean for us today? And as I said this morning, we're going to be in Luke 9, verse 28 to 36. So if you would stand with me for the reading of God's Word this morning. About 8 days after Jesus said this, he took Peter, John, and James with him, and they went up on a mountain to pray. And as he was praying, the appearance of his face changed, and his clothes became as bright as a flash of lightning. And 2 men, Moses and Elijah, appeared in glorious splendor, talking with Jesus. They spoke about his departure, which was about to bring fulfillment to Jerusalem. Peter and his companions were very sleepy, but when they became fully awake, they saw his glory and the 2 men standing with him. And as the men were leaving Peter said to him, "Master, it is good for us to be here. Let us put up 3 shelters, one for you, one for Moses, and one for Elijah." And he did not know what he was saying. And while he was speaking, a cloud appeared and covered them, and they were afraid as they entered the cloud. And a voice came from the cloud saying, "This is my son, whom I have chosen. Listen to him." When the voice had spoken, they found that Jesus was alone. The disciples kept this to themselves, and they did not tell anyone at that time what they had seen. Thank you. You may be seated. So let me set the scene for you. Where are we in this gospel story? Jesus has already fed the 5,000. He's walked on water. He's healed many, many people. And he's just had this very important conversation with his disciples. And the Transfiguration takes place about a week after this conversation at Caesarea Philippi. It's often referred to as Peter's confession. And Jesus is asking the disciples, "Who do people say that I am?" And if you recall that story, they say, some say a prophet. Some say you're Elijah who's back. Others say you're John the Baptist, back from the dead. And you remember Jesus looks at them and says, "What about you? Who do you say that I am?" And Peter, in that moment, comes forward and says, "You are the Christ, the Son of the living God." And this confession from Peter is very important because it's the first time a definitive claim is made about Jesus amongst his closest followers. You know, it's one thing to think something in your head. It's another thing to say it out loud. And from that moment on, when it's been declared who Jesus is out loud amongst his followers, Jesus starts talking openly about his death and his purpose. And so we fast forward about a week, and we arrive at verse 28. I say about a week because in a couple other Gospels, it says 6 days later. Gospel of Luke says about 8 days later, so we're going to say about a week. All right? Verse 28. About 8 days later, Jesus said this. He took Peter, John, and James with him, and they went on a mountain to pray. Peter, James, and John. These three are Jesus' inner circle, aren't they? They're the ones who get to see and experience things that others don't. The same three Jesus later takes deeper into the garden the night before his arrest. And here he takes them on a mountain to pray. And as he's praying, the appearance of his face changed, and his clothes became as bright as a flash of lightning. Two men, Moses and Elijah, appeared in glorious splendor, talking with Jesus. So this truly is a scene unlike anything else in the New Testament. First, Jesus transfigures. His skin radiates like divine glory. This extends even to his clothes. His appearance is so bright, it's like looking directly into the sun. Suddenly, he no longer looks like this rabbi they'd come to know, clothed in dazzling light of heaven itself. He looks like a celestial being, like pure light and power, like holiness personified, like the embodiment of divine majesty. And for a moment, there's a glimpse of the glory within him, his true essence of who he really is. And if that weren't enough, we're told two of the most famous figures in Jewish history who haven't walked earth for thousands of years are standing there with Jesus, Moses and Elijah. But why Moses and Elijah? On the screen there, this is a mosaic that you could see if you went to the Church of Transfiguration in Galilee. And we often will see when this event is depicted that you'll see Moses there, Moses with the Ten Commandments. Oftentimes Elijah has a scroll, and you see that here. They are symbols of what they represent. The Torah, the 613 commands that ordered the Jewish life and culture, typically symbolized by the Ten Commandments. The Torah was the authority of God for all of ancient Jews. It represented God's will, his commands, his rule in their daily lives. It was God's revelation of himself, of his holiness, of his character, of his expectations for how his people were to live their lives. For an ancient Jew, your entire theology, understanding of history, culture, relationships, work, worldview, worship, everything was dictated by the law. And this is Moses standing with Jesus. Moses, the giver of the law, the great deliverer who brought the people out of bondage in Egypt. We remember the plagues, the crossing of the Red Sea, the expedition of the Hebrew people through the wilderness, manna from heaven, water from rocks. When God got ready to give the law that would be so important to the lives of his people, it was Moses he spoke to. Moses who met God on the mountaintop. Moses who led God's people through the promised land. And this man, Moses, is standing there. And it's incredible because Moses is perhaps the single most important figure in Jewish history. He was so revered that his name became synonymous with obedience to God. Often when an ancient Jew would speak about holiness, they wouldn't even talk about the Torah. They wouldn't say the law says so-and-so. They would say Moses said, Moses wrote, Moses commanded. When the Pharisees wanted to insult the man Jesus healed, they said, "You are this fellow's disciple? We are disciples of Moses." For the ancient Jew, If Moses said it, God said it. So on one hand, there's the law. Right? On the other hand, there's the prophets. The two things that sum up the Jewish faith. So after the Hebrew people had settled the land, there were certain individuals that began to emerge who had a unique connection with God. These people could speak to God. They could hear God speak back. And they were tasked with conveying the message to the nations, and sometimes they even had the power to perform miracles. And the most notable prophets had their lives and works recorded in books that ancient Jews regarded as Holy Scripture. And the most revered prophet in all of ancient Israel was Elijah. Now for us, if you were to ask us that question, we might say Isaiah or Jeremiah. But for the ancient Jew, Elijah was the epitome of the prophet. Because it was Elijah who confronted the kings, stood against idolatry and corruption, performed incredible miracles. You'll remember he raised the widow's son from the dead, parted the waters of the Jordan River, many other things, including calling down fire from heaven. And he was a pivotal figure in turning the hearts of the people back to God because of the significance of his role in history. Moses is perhaps the single most important figure of Jewish history, but Elijah represents the prophetic tradition in its entirety, all of the prophets who followed in his footsteps. So this is the scene. This is the picture on the mountain. And it is a breathtaking moment. Seeing the two most important figures in Jewish history, the ones who represent God himself, the law and the prophecy, and they appear on earth once again, Moses and Elijah, standing in radiant glory with Jesus. Do you like going to the mountains? I like going to the mountains. When I was a youth minister, I'd often take our student ministry to the mountains to go to youth camp. In fact, it was at Silver Cliff Camp in Colorado where I surrendered to ministry in the mountains. I was pleased when my two students, my own personal boys who were in youth ministry, got to go to Glorieta this summer to go to youth camp back in the mountains. It is biblically true. God speaks to people in the mountains. And so think about this. These mountains play a significant role in these men's lives, don't they? Moses climbed Mount Sinai to receive the law. And while he was there communing with God, he asked to see God's glory. And God said, "No, you will die." So God put Moses in a crevice in the mountain, and he covered it and passed by. And Moses got to experience the glory that God left in his wake. When Moses came down from the mountain, his face was shining with the glory of God. Elijah had his mountaintop on Mount Carmel, where he challenged 400 pagan prophets to see who the real God was. They each offered a sacrifice. Whichever God answered could be proven true. That time, the nation was turning to other gods. So Elijah called down fire from heaven, consuming his sacrifice and turning the people's hearts back to God. And Moses and Elijah once again find themselves on the mountaintop communing with God. And in Jesus, Moses sees the glory he had once longed to behold. And Elijah sees the ultimate sacrifice that will turn the hearts back to God. And for just one moment, the veil is pulled back, and the eternal splendor of Christ shines through. And on that mountain was the convergence of the law and the prophets and everything that will be, ancient hopes realized, promises fulfilled. And on that mountain was the breaking dawn of a new and better covenant. And Luke tells us in 31, they spoke about his departure, which was about to bring fulfillment at Jerusalem. That word departure, Luke is making it very simple for us. And it really would have hit home with the Jewish people. He's essentially saying, remember the all-important event where the great signs and wonders when Moses led our people out of slavery? You remember the Exodus? Well, a new and greater Moses has arrived. And through the cross, he will lead the ultimate exodus out of bondage of the grave and into eternal life. And he will bring all the God's people with him. And he does it. So you have this incredible moment on the mountain. The law and the prophets bear witness, the culmination of everything in God's redemptive plan, a plan that's about to be fulfilled at the cross. And while the one and only historical, unrepeatable conversation is taking place, where are Peter, James, and John but sleeping? Peter and his companions were very sleepy. But when they became fully awake, they saw his glory and the two men standing with him. This translation says sleepy. Yours might say sleeping. That literal word is heavy sleep. They're not just sleepy. They're sleeping hard. They're out. And you can imagine John elbowing Peter, "Wake up! You're missing it." James blinking in disbelief, rubbing his eyes. "What are we seeing?" Trying to figure out what is going on. Is this a dream? And as Moses and Elijah are about to leave, Peter, being Peter, jumps into action. It says in verse 33, as the men were leaving Jesus, Peter said to him, "Master, it is good for us to be here. Let us put up 3 shelters, one for you, one for Moses, one for Elijah." And then Luke adds, and he did not know what he was saying. So in Peter's eagerness to honor this moment, he suggests setting up 3 tents. Let's extend our time together on the mountaintop. His desire to prolong this incredible experience is understandable. But why was setting up tents so bad? Who would want this experience to end? Well, scholars would tell you the error that he makes and the reason that Luke says he did not know what he was saying is that his offer implies equality between Jesus, Moses, and Elijah. Now, Peter is essentially placing Jesus on the same level as these 2 great figures of Jewish history. And my personal guess is that for Peter, he thinks he's paying Jesus a tremendous compliment. But God himself swiftly corrects this implication. Because while he was speaking, a cloud appeared and covered them. And they were afraid as they entered the cloud. And a voice came from the cloud saying, "This is my son whom I have chosen. Listen to him." One of the most significant moments in the entire Bible, Peter, John, and James experienced something no human had ever experienced before. When the cloud descended, they were enveloped in the direct presence of God. In the Old Testament, this would have been immediate death. And that's why Moses was denied when he asked. And yet, here they stood. And God is saying, no, he's not like one of these. One of these is not like the others. One of them is my son. Listen to him. That word for listen, it's not listen like you listen to a song. In this context, it means receive, accept, submit to. Ultimately, it means obey. So in the presence of the law, Moses himself, God says, listen to Jesus. In the presence of the greatest prophet, God says, listen to Jesus. Jesus is not a third. He's not an addition. He's not an equal voice among others in the Bible. He is the revelation of everything God had to say from the beginning. And if you want the clearest, best possible understanding of the character of God, the heart of God, who God is, what God's about, what's God's will for your life, the challenge is the same. Listen to Jesus. A pastor named Brian Zahn writes, Jesus is what the law and prophets point toward and bow to. Jesus is what the Old Testament was trying to say but could never fully articulate. Jesus is the perfect Word of God in the form of human life. Because in our age of information, there are countless voices vying for our attention. Different perspectives, interpretations, beliefs, teachings, ideologies. And amidst all the noise, whether because we're too distracted, we aren't truly listening, we can easily miss the voice of Jesus. And if it was true then, church, it's true today. Jesus is not an equal voice amongst the others. And his is the one voice we must strain to hear, because his is the one voice that speaks nothing but truth. His is the voice that heals what's broken within us. His is the voice that can calm the storm. The voice of Jesus is the voice that leads us directly to the heart of God. So when you face challenges that test your faith, that leave you questioning everything. Listen to Jesus. When you've been wronged, abused, betrayed, listen to Jesus. When you feel burned out, exhausted, spiritually empty, wondering whether there's more to life than what you're living, listen to Jesus. I don't know a better way to say it than this. These other voices are lying to you, saying that if you're not happy or satisfied, you should work more, spend more, get more. They're telling you to be with someone else who gets you. Or even worse, they're telling you no one cares about you, that God doesn't love you. These voices are lying, and they're so loud. Let's read verse 36 and find the end of this story. When the voice had spoken, they found that Jesus was alone. And the disciples kept this to themselves and did not tell anyone at that time what they had seen. So Moses and Elijah, they disappear, and the law and the prophets had done their part, pointing to Jesus. And now it's Jesus alone, standing before the disciples, embodying the fullness of God's revelation. And it's in this moment, when the dust settles and everything appears to be back to normal, we see the culmination of all that God has been revealing throughout history. You know, the law and the prophets, they're like that incomplete piece of music or that novel that's missing the last couple chapters. They point towards something greater, but they're not complete on their own. And when the disciples looked up and saw Jesus standing on the mountaintop, it was this powerful reminder that he is the one that completes the story. Jesus Christ is the fulfillment of the law and the prophets, the resurrected and returning King. And his voice must be the defining authority in our lives. And in a world full of noise and distractions, it's the voice of Jesus that can be trusted above all else. So I want you to ask some questions here as we finish our time. First is, have you ever said yes to the voice of Jesus calling to you for salvation? All of this starts with you hearing that voice and saying yes. I pray that today is the day you say yes to that. What are some distractions that prevent you from truly listening to the voice of Jesus? What are some ways that you can make hearing the voice of Jesus easier? What practical steps can you take to ensure Jesus' teachings guide you, your decisions, and your actions? Church, do you live your life in such a way you can hear the voice of Jesus speak? In our passage that Dr. Reed read earlier, Jeremiah 29:13, he says, "You will seek me and find me when you seek me with all of your heart." God is not hiding. God longs to have a relationship with you. Seek him, cut out the noise so you can hear his voice. God is telling you exactly what he told the disciples on that mountain. This is my son. Listen to him. We're going to stand for a time of invitation. As you go ahead and stand with me, maybe Jesus is calling you to salvation. Maybe the voice of Jesus is saying, hey, today is the day. Make Pioneer Drive your home. No doubt, he's calling all of us to respond in some way. All of us have been challenged this morning from the Word of God on what is distracting us from hearing the voice of God. Whether you come down front or you stay in your pew, don't miss this opportunity to listen to the voice of Jesus and respond. Let's sing together.